1 week after the Dodgers' disappointing end of the season game against the Mets, Dodgers manager Don Mattingly is out.
The Dodgers won 3 straight National League West Division titles for the first time in history, but each time they fell short of the World Series. The team says the decision for him to step down is mutual.
A day of kind of missed opportunities, bases loaded, nobody out, and kind of didn't get down to 2 bunts.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are areas that we got to be able to execute because if you get 2 bunts down, you give yourself 2 chances to score. So those are chances, and obviously the 7th there is an inning that kind of flips the game. We have a chance to, put 1 or more on the board with contact.
The truth is, Lou Piniella knew something about Don Mattingly that nobody else could see. Not just about his swing or talent, but what made him different from every player in baseball. People remember Mattingly as a legend, the hitman who carried the Yankees through dark years. He shaped the greatest captains in Yankees history and showed young players how to conduct themselves with professionalism and dignity. But there's a secret reason why the modern game looks at him completely different. The very skills that made him a genius in one era became why he couldn't adapt to the next. The physics Piniella taught him worked perfectly in 1984, but it stopped working in 2024. Why does the same guy who dominated the 1980s now struggle with today's baseball world? Why did Toronto strip him of his offensive coordinator title in late 2024? Why do analytics people dismiss him as outdated? The answer is darker and more complicated than you think. 5 specific voices point to the fundamental truth about who Mattingly was, who he became, and why he couldn't change. If you want more baseball stories like this one, hit the hype feature and give this video some hype. That way more fans see it and we can keep bringing you the real deep dive stories behind the players everybody loves and respects but don't fully understand. Because understanding Mattingly is understanding baseball itself. Let's start with the moment everything changed for Mattingly as a coach and manager in baseball. Late 2024, the Toronto Blue Jays made a decision that shocked the entire baseball world and organization. Don Mattingly, who had been hired specifically as the offensive coordinator with authority over their hitting program, was stripped of that title entirely. The man they brought in to fix their struggling offense got demoted back to bench coach. His influence was cut off completely. The organization basically said, we do not want you running our offense anymore, but we still need you in the dugout to provide veteran presence and leadership. This was not a quiet move. This was not a subtle adjustment. This was a very public message. The Blue Jays offense was ranking 23rd in runs scored in the league, 23rd out of 30 teams, with a roster that had star players and championship caliber talent. And critics immediately pointed to one specific thing: Mattingly's philosophy. His resistance to launch angle, his obsession with what he calls the one swing theory, the belief that you hit the same way no matter what pitch comes at you. The numbers tell the story that management did not want to hear. Mattingly believes you hit the same way regardless of pitch type. You do not manufacture a fly ball. You do not uppercut and try to lift the ball. You do not adjust your mechanics based on the count or the pitcher. You let the contact point and the pitch location determine the result naturally. To modern analysts and biomechanists, this sounds insane. It sounds like heresy. The fly ball revolution is based on objective physics. Air balls produce significantly higher run values than ground balls. Period. It's measured, it's quantified, it's provable. But Mattingly kept pushing contact. Keep the ball in play. Do not teach young kids to lift the ball into the air. Do not teach them to manipulate their mechanics. And the Jays' offense got worse, not better, worse. The demotion was not personal. It was professional necessity. The team needed to move forward. Mattingly needed to move back. 1 year before, he would have been considered a coaching legend. 1 year later, he was a liability holding the organization back. This is the first crack in the story everyone needs to understand completely and deeply. Mattingly as a manager operated under a completely different science. He was cutting edge and revolutionary in 1985. He was ancient history by 2024. But here is where it gets interesting and complicated. The same man everybody called genius for 4 decades suddenly became the problem nobody could fix. The same man who dominated pitching in the 1980s couldn't connect with hitters in the 2020s. The fundamental issue is not talent. It's not effort or intelligence. It's that the game's baseline changed. Number 5, George Steinbrenner, the boss, the man who owned Mattingly but never really understood him. Steinbrenner saw dollar signs and championships. He saw a salary so massive it paralyzed him with expectation and resentment. In 1990, Mattingly signed for $19.3 million over 5 years, highest paid player in baseball history at that moment. It was a staggering amount of money. Steinbrenner celebrated the contract when it was signed, then immediately resented it. Because here's the cruel math of New York Yankees baseball under Steinbrenner. If you pay a guy like Superman, you expect him to perform like Superman. You expect him to win alone. You expect him to carry a mediocre roster to October glory. Steinbrenner pushed this narrative constantly and publicly. Mattingly was paid like the best player ever. Therefore, Mattingly should deliver championships. The boss would compare him unfavorably to Reggie Jackson, to Thurman Munson, giants of the past who won hardware. But Mattingly never got there. From 1982 to 1995, the Yankees did not win a single postseason game. Not one. 13 years of nothing. A generation of failure. A lost era. This was not Mattingly's fault. Steinbrenner ran the team into the ground. He fired scouts who built the farm system. He traded prospects for aging veterans. He created a culture of paranoia and fear. Managers got fired every year. The organization was chaos. But Steinbrenner needed someone to blame, so he blamed his highest-paid star. Mattingly became the face of failure, even though he was the only reason the franchise was respectable. Steinbrenner watched him hit, watched him show up, and then publicly questioned if Mattingly could even lead. The infamous haircut incident in 1991 shows how broken and toxic this dynamic really was. Mattingly's hair grew out into a mullet style, long and flowing in the back. Steinbrenner, technically suspended from day-to-day operations at the time, but still pulling strings through surrogates and management, demanded Mattingly cut his hair immediately. This was not about grooming or professionalism or appearance standards. This was about power dynamics. About who was really in charge, about reminding everyone that Steinbrenner was the one making decisions and players followed orders. Mattingly refused on principle. He cited his right to bodily autonomy and personal choice as an individual. So he got benched. The captain of the team, the best player on the roster, benched because of hair length. The newspapers mocked the organization relentlessly. Talk radio went insane questioning the priorities. But Steinbrenner had made his point crystal clear. He was the boss. And Mattingly worked for him. Mattingly did what he was told. The irony is devastating, though. Late in life, Steinbrenner campaigned hard and publicly for Mattingly's Hall of Fame candidacy. He pushed for his induction. He became Mattingly's advocate. Analysts and historians figured out why eventually. Steinbrenner realized his own failure as an owner was destroying Mattingly's legacy. The missing ring was not Mattingly's fault. It was the owner's fault. It was the result of Steinbrenner's incompetent management. By pushing Mattingly into Cooperstown, by advocating for his Hall of Fame election, Steinbrenner tried to clean up his own record, to reduce his own culpability, to redeem himself in some small way. Number 4, Wade Boggs, a first ballot Hall of Famer unanimously on the first ballot, one of the greatest pure hitters in the entire history of Major League Baseball. And he said something that changed how people thought about Mattingly. From 1984 to 1989, from Mattingly's absolute peak years, Wade Boggs said on record that Mattingly was simply the best all-around player in baseball. Not the best hitter, the best all-around player. That is a specific and powerful distinction. Boggs was not just flattering or being nostalgic, he was deadly serious and precise. He had competed directly against Mattingly. They fought for batting titles every season. They battled in clutch situations. They went head-to-head when it mattered. And after all that competition, Boggs said Mattingly was the complete package, the total player. The numbers back this assessment up completely and overwhelmingly without question or doubt. During those 6 years from 1984 through 1989, Mattingly averaged .327 with 26 home runs and 114 RB is per season consistently. He led the entire league in RB, is with 684 total runs driven in during this span. No other player drove in more runs during that entire period of baseball history. Not Wade Boggs, not Mike Schmidt, not any other superstar. He led in total bases in back-to-back years in 1985 and 1986. He finished second in hits only to Wade Boggs himself with 1,219 hits. He won consecutive Gold Gloves at first base from 1985 to 1989, 5 straight years. 5. And he struck out only about 33 times per season on average. Roughly 1 strikeout every 23 plate appearances. For a power hitter, that is remarkably low. These numbers do not describe a good player. They describe someone defining an entire era. They describe dominance. Boggs noted something deeper and more psychological, though. He said he visualized the pitch before it arrived. He predetermined the zone in his mind before the pitcher even threw. It was a mental picture he created in advance. But Mattingly worked completely differently. Mattingly trusted a feeling. He felt how he was being pitched. He reacted to pitcher tendencies and patterns. Both approaches worked. Both were elite. The The difference was Mattingly's defense was absolutely incredible and transformational. Boggs was a capable third baseman. Mattingly was a wizard at first base. Magic. He picked throws in the dirt like it was second nature. He had soft hands and great footwork. He ranged far into foul territory and saved his infielders from errors constantly. He positioned himself perfectly. This completeness is what Boggs remembered and praised. Not just power, not just batting average, but the total package of excellence at every single aspect. The guy who could do everything at the highest level, nobody could do all of it like Mattingly could. This is the Sandy Koufax argument for Mattingly's Hall of Fame case exactly. Koufax retired early due to arthritis, but his peak was so dominant that nobody questions his credentials. Nobody is on the outside looking in. Mattingly's back destroyed his longevity and career length. He never got 3,000 hits, never got 500 home runs. But from 1984 to 1989, he may have been the best player in all of baseball. Boggs believed that wholeheartedly, and Boggs had played against him when it mattered most, when the stakes were highest. Number 3, Derek Jeter, the most famous apprentice in Yankees history, the greatest captain since Mattingly. And here's the secret about their relationship that almost nobody understands or appreciates. Jeter did not learn hitting from Mattingly. That is not what Mattingly taught him at all. What Mattingly taught Jeter was survival. Pure institutional survival in one of the most volatile, unpredictable, chaotic franchises in sports history. During spring training early in Jeter's career, Mattingly pulled the young shortstop aside. This was not a casual or random conversation. This was a deliberate moment. A passing of knowledge from a veteran who had endured everything to a young player who had seen nothing. Mattingly told him something that seemed simple on the surface. Always run onto the field and off the field. Always hustle. Always move with purpose. Do not walk. Do not stroll. Run. Every single time, no matter what. Jeter thought this was entertainment advice at first. He thought Mattingly wanted him to put on a show for the fans in the stands. He thought this was about creating excitement or impressing the crowd with dramatic flair. So Jeter asked him about it. Mattingly corrected him immediately and bluntly. The running was not for the crowd, it was for George Steinbrenner, for the boss watching from his office window high above the stadium, for the owner who monitored every movement through binoculars during spring training and games, for the man who decided who stayed and who was traded away. This lesson was about perception management in a paranoid environment. You have to understand the universe that Mattingly inhabited daily. Steinbrenner was obsessed with effort above all else. He equated hustle with heart and dedication. He confused running on and off the field with caring about winning. In that paranoid environment, perception was currency. It was more valuable than actual performance sometimes. Mattingly knew this better than anyone alive. Mattingly had endured an era of complete chaos and dysfunction. From 1982 through the late 1980s, Steinbrenner changed managers 17 times in 17 years. 17 different managers. A different skipper almost every single year. That kind of constant instability destroys organizations from within, but it also teaches you something if you survive it. It teaches you that talent alone is not protection. You cannot rely on your ability to keep you safe from an erratic owner. You need perception. You need optics. You need to look like you belong, even when everything around you is falling apart and losing. Mattingly had learned this lesson the hard way through painful experience. And now he was passing it to Jeter like a secret password into a club nobody wants to join. By teaching Jeter to run on and off the field, Mattingly was teaching behavioral camouflage and survival skills. He was showing him how to stay safe from an erratic owner, known for humiliating players in public. He was showing him how to protect himself during a slump. He was showing him that even if you go hitless for a week, even if you make errors, even if your performance dips, you can still look like a professional. You can still look engaged and committed. You can still look like you belong in the uniform. That visual impression would keep you employed while Steinbrenner cycled through other managers and second basemen. Jeter followed this lesson religiously for 20 years of his career. It became automatic and second nature to him. His signature image became sprinting to shortstop at the start of each inning and jogging briskly back to the dugout after 3 outs. People called it elite-level hustle and dedication. They called it class. National reporters celebrated his work ethic in every article they wrote. Baseball people praised his consistency and dedication and leadership. Analysts pointed to his visible effort and urgency as proof of his leadership abilities. But it all started as a defensive mechanism, a learned behavior, a survival tool designed to protect himself from Steinbrenner's erratic and unpredictable wrath. The irony that cuts deepest is that Jeter made this tactic his own. He genuinely believed in it eventually. the mask became the man. His teammates saw it as authentic leadership instead of institutional survival strategy. Mattingly famously noted in later interviews that while Jeter was destined for greatness, regardless of their interaction, the young shortstop possessed a unique ability to take the right things and make them his own. To download Mattingly's software on professionalism while operating in a more successful era. Jeter was starting his career right as the Yankees' bad luck was turning, right as the lost years were finally ending. Where Mattingly had to survive in chaos, Jeter got to thrive in stability. But the foundation was the same. Run on and off the field. Look the part. Protect yourself. Make yourself indispensable through optics and presence. The tragic element in their story runs deep, though. Mattingly's career ended in 1995, exactly 1 year before the Yankees' dynasty started. The 1996 World Series title came after Mattingly left, so Jeter got the championship Mattingly never received. Jeter got the hardware, the rings, but Jeter credits Mattingly for teaching him the foundation. By praising Mattingly constantly through his entire career, Jeter validated the lost years from 1982 to 1995 as necessary preparation. He positioned Mattingly not as a failure, but as the keeper of the flame, the guy who kept the Yankee way alive through darkness so it could be passed to the core four and eventually to the championship teams. Number 2, Dwight Gooden, Dr. K the Mets phenom, one of the greatest pitchers ever to take the mound. And Gooden admitted something in candid moments that revealed something profound about Mattingly. Gooden said he was afraid of facing Don Mattingly. Think about that concept. Gooden dominated the National League in 1985. It was one of the greatest pitching seasons ever recorded. He had an overpowering fastball that hitters could not catch up to. He had a devastating curveball called Lord Charles that terrified hitters. He dismantled the best lineups. Mike Schmidt, Dale Murphy, Andre Dawson. Elite hitters all fell to Gooden's stuff, but Mattingly terrified him. Not because of power, not because Mattingly was a home run threat hitting for distance. Gooden feared the look in Mattingly's eyes. That intensity, that laser focus. Mattingly had a look that signaled he meant business on every single pitch. Gooden said, "I am glad I do not have to face that guy every day. I would be terrified." This reveals something crucial about how value and success worked in the 1980s baseball era. In the modern era, intimidation is measured precisely by heat maps and exit velocities and launch angles. In the 1980s, it was psychological warfare, pure and simple. Gooden explained that most hitters had vulnerable pitches they would chase compulsively, counts where they would guess instead of react. Pitches outside the zone they couldn't resist swinging at. Mattingly did not have these weaknesses. He treated every pitch as a calculated mental battle. He would not beat himself through mental error. He would force the pitcher to be perfect. The statistics confirm this completely. From 1984 to 1989, Mattingly was the hardest strikeout in baseball among power hitters. He only struck out about 33 times per season on average. That is 1 strikeout every 23 plate appearances. For a guy trying to hit home runs, that is remarkably low. For a pitcher like Gooden, whose game was predicated on the strikeout, on making batters miss, Mattingly represented a structural problem. He fouled off outstanding pitches. He extended counts to deep leverage. He forced deeper at-bats that exhausted the pitcher's energy. Most hitters would swing and miss or take strikes. Mattingly refused to do either. This forced Gooden to work harder, to use more pitches, to expand his entire repertoire, and if Mattingly ever made an out, it was productive. It was a sac fly or a double into the gap. Even failure was dangerous with Mattingly at the plate. Gooden's fear was rational. It was based on the reality that Mattingly would not quit on an at-bat, would not beat himself, would make the pitcher execute at the absolute highest level. That is exactly what scared a dominant power pitcher. Number 1, Lou Piniella, the man who unlocked Mattingly's true power. And this is where the secret science comes in. Before 1984, Mattingly was viewed as a contact hitter, a gap hitter, a guy who sprayed doubles down the lines and into the alleys but did not have consistent home run power. Then Piniella arrived on the scene and changed everything. Piniella had been Mattingly's teammate and mentor initially. Later, he became his manager and hitting coach. And Piniella brought something to the table that was revolutionary. He brought a trained eye, an understanding of mechanics, an ability to identify what was holding Mattingly back from his full potential. Piniella saw something mechanical in Mattingly's swing that nobody else noticed. Something subtle but fundamental to his power production. Mattingly was a top hand guy. His dominant top hand controlled the swing. His grip was strong at the top. His upper hand was the engine driving the bat. In baseball mechanics, a dominant top hand creates topspin when it hits the ball. The bat comes through the zone at an angle that imparts spin in one direction. Topspin makes the ball dive. The ball resists lift. It wants to go down and away. So when Mattingly hit the ball with topspin, the result was hard ground balls and sinking line drives. Beautiful line drives that found the gaps for doubles. He was a double machine, lots of doubles, but no fence clearing power, just a steady stream of gap hits. Piniella recognized something crucial that changed everything. While Mattingly felt he was crushing the ball, while his bat speed was excellent, while his timing was impeccable, the physics of his spin were working against him. The Magnus effect was not helping him. It was hurting him. The ball was diving instead of carrying over the fence. He was a victim of his own mechanics and his natural swing path. Piniella taught him the secret. Create backspin instead. Get lift instead of topspin. Fight gravity instead of surrendering to it. This required a subtle but profound mechanical adjustment that took Mattingly weeks to internalize. The adjustment was technical and counterintuitive to everything he had done naturally throughout his life. Mattingly had to shorten his route to the ball significantly and deliberately. He had to get his hands to the pitch faster and quicker than before. He had to use his bottom hand to guide the barrel under the ball's center of gravity instead of above it where he was used to. His top hand had to relax slightly and become secondary in importance. His bottom hand had to become the guide and the leader. The barrel had to approach the ball from below instead of above. This took practice and repetition. This created backspin on the ball. The Magnus effect now worked in his favor. As the ball spins backward, air pressure decreases above the ball and increases below it. This fights gravity directly. The ball no longer dives into the ground. The ball flies through the air. The ball carries over the fence for home runs. Mattingly described this transformation as learning a thought process in your work and approach. It marked the transition from a natural reactive hitter to a calculated engineered one. Before he trusted his hands and his instincts completely. After the adjustment, he had to think about it. He had to execute the technique precisely. He had to manipulate his mechanics with intention and awareness. The results were immediate and absolutely staggering. In 1983, before the adjustment, he hit 4 home runs. In 1984, following Piniella's intervention, he hit 23. By 1985, he hit 35. By 1986, he hit 31. This was not a change in strength. Mattingly did not suddenly get stronger or bigger. He did not add 20 pounds of muscle. It was a change in physics. Pure physics engineered by Piniella's scientific eye. Piniella repeatedly called Mattingly scientific in his approach. He said Mattingly was one of the first players to treat every at-bat as a calculated mental battle. He studied pitchers like a chess master studies opponents. In the context of the 1980s, being scientific meant something specific. It meant a rigorous study of pitcher tendencies. Who threw fastballs early in the count? Who threw breaking balls on 0-2? Who favored certain locations against left-handers? It meant real-time mechanical self-correction. If a pitch was on the inner half and he fouled it back, you had to understand why. Did your front side open too early? Did your hands break too late? Did you lose your lower half? It meant obsessing over bat-to-ball capability and contact. The ability to make contact on purpose. To hit the ball to the opposite field if needed. To use the whole field. Mattingly kept mental and sometimes physical notes on how pitchers attacked him. He was data-driven before data existed in modern baseball. He was tracking pitch types and locations and sequencing patterns. He was a proto-analyst in an era before analytics became mainstream. This approach was cutting edge. This was revolutionary. Pitchers could not fool him because he remembered everything. He cataloged everything in his mind. He understood patterns. Piniella's science of hitting was about reading the pitcher and adjusting your mechanics accordingly. And Mattingly became the ultimate student of this method. But here's where the paradox begins to form and crack deeply. That science was era-specific and not applicable to modern times. That science worked perfectly in the 1980s and 1990s during Piniella's prime. Piniella's science was about feeling the barrel as you swung through the zone, about adjusting swing path with your hands and wrists and lower body positioning, about reading pitch location and reacting with your mechanics in real time without overthinking. It was elegant. It was subtle. It was beautiful in a way that defied quantification, and it absolutely worked perfectly for its time. Mattingly became a superstar with this method. He became an MVP candidate every year. He became one of the best hitters in all of baseball. But modern science operates on completely different variables entirely. Modern science is biomechanical optimization measured precisely. It is spin rate analysis tracked by radar guns. It is launch angle consistency quantified by StatCast. It is exit velocity optimization, data-driven and measurable. The game developed metrics that measure exactly what matters. And what matters is the angle of attack and bat speed, and the angle of the bat relative to the ground at contact. These are the new variables. These are what managers and front offices obsess over now. The variables of the equation changed fundamentally and completely over time and evolution. And Mattingly stayed loyal to Piniella's method forever and ever without wavering. He never moved on or adapted. He never adapted to new realities of the game. He coached young hitters the way he was coached himself many decades before in a different era. Feel the barrel in your hands. Make adjustments in real time. Trust your hands over instruments. Trust your instincts over data. Use the whole field. Study the pitcher. This is old school now. This is seen as anti-progress, anti-analytics, anti-science. But Mattingly never accepted that his method was outdated. He believed in it because it had worked, because Piniella was right about the physics in 1984, and that belief hardened into rigidity over time. As a player, Mattingly was the ultimate professional and role model. As a manager, he became a relic trapped in an obsolete system. His years managing the Dodgers from 2011 to 2015 proved this conclusively and without question. Critics called him double-switch Donnie because he stuck to the save rule religiously and refused to adapt. He would not use his best reliever Kenley Jansen in high-leverage situations in the 7th or 8th inning when it mattered most. He saved him exclusively for a 9th inning that might never come if the game was already decided. This was textbook old-school thinking. The save rule mattered in the 1980s when baseball was different. In 2015, it was a handicap. It was a straitjacket. It was self-sabotage. The 2013 NLCS showed the problem at its worst and most obvious. Tie game against the Cardinals. Late innings. Mattingly removed his best run producer, Adrian Gonzalez, for a pinch runner. The strategy failed completely. Gonzalez never scored. The runner died on the base path. When his spot came up again in extra innings, the Dodgers had a weaker bat. They lost the game. They lost the series. This decision lives in the memory of Dodgers fans as proof of his inability to manage under pressure and make smart decisions. It was rigid. It was old. It was stuck in 1985 thinking. In Miami, the problems multiplied and accelerated. Anonymous players complained about lack of clubhouse culture and communication, poor communication between manager and players, tactical decisions that felt scripted instead of responsive. Mattingly won Manager of the Year in 2020, but his overall record was mediocre, under 500. He could manage a roster mechanically, but he could not lead young modern players. The disconnect was real and palpable. His old-school presence felt disconnected from players who grew up in a different baseball era. And then the Toronto situation hit hard in late 2024. The Blue Jays brought him in as offensive coordinator. A brand new title, new authority and responsibility. The chance to design the entire hitting program from scratch. But the offense ranked 23rd in runs scored in baseball. Players resisted his philosophy actively and openly. His refusal to teach modern launch angle mechanics. His insistence on pure contact and gap hitting. His belief in the one swing theory. The organization realized the experiment was failing catastrophically after months of struggle. So they moved him back to bench coach position, limited his influence severely, kept his presence for veteran leadership and stability, but took away his power to make decisions about hitting strategy. This was not a gradual fade. This was a sudden termination of his coaching authority. This is the cruel truth about how baseball evolves and changes. The game moved past Mattingly completely. The game passed him by without looking back. The physics changed fundamentally. The priorities changed. The language changed. The entire sport changed. And Mattingly did not change with it. He refused to adapt. However, here is where the story gets redemptive. Despite everything, Mattingly's influence endures in ways that matter. Derek Jeter learned professionalism from him. Jeter became a champion and Hall of Famer. Jeter credits Mattingly constantly. The lesson about running on and off the field became the foundation of Jeter's brand. That matters. That proves something. That shows Mattingly understood the human element better than anyone. From 1984 to 1989, he defined an era. Wade Boggs said so explicitly. He was the best all-around player in baseball. Dwight Gooden feared facing him. Derek Jeter modeled himself after him. Lou Piniella created him and his hitting style. George Steinbrenner, despite everything, campaigned hard for his Hall of Fame eligibility. The tragedy of Don Mattingly is not that he was a bad manager or a bad teacher or a bad person. The tragedy is that he was excellent at one very specific thing, and the thing changed. He conquered the mechanics of the 1980s completely. He conquered the psychology of playing under Steinbrenner and surviving chaos. He conquered the art of being a professional baseball player with dignity. And when he tried to pass those same skills down to younger generations and modern teams, the world did not want them anymore. But he is still remembered very well. Not by analytics departments, not by modern strategists and front offices, but by the players he touched intimately, the lessons he taught them, the way he showed up every day without complaint. That endures forever. That is his true legacy that cannot be measured or quantified. He built professionalism as a standard. He built resilience in the face of chaos. He built the Yankee way as a philosophy of conduct. It was a tragedy. If you've seen the thumbnail, you know what I'm talking about. Tommy Lasorda standing there speaking, while we see the images of Gary Carter's funeral service. Two different worlds. One showing a legend who managed him, the other showing the goodbye nobody wanted to see. But here's what makes this story so heavy, so real, so worth your attention right now. When baseball's greatest names gathered to say goodbye to Gary Carter in 2012, they didn't reveal some scandal hidden in his past. They didn't come out with stories that shattered his image. Instead, they revealed something far more stunning. His joy was real. His smile wasn't a mask. His optimism, his love for the game, his devotion to his family and faith, all of it was genuinely him, even as his body screamed in pain, even as cancer attacked his brain, even as the world closed in. The painful truth wasn't that we'd been fooled by a performance. The painful truth was that we finally understood just how rare it is to meet someone whose outside perfectly matches their inside, someone who refused to become cynical in a cynical game, someone who chose to build other people up instead of tearing them down. In the days and weeks after Carter died, legends who played with him, against him, and for him started talking. Keith Hernandez, Andre Dawson, Dwight Gooden, Daryl Strawberry, Johnny Bench, Tom Seaver, Ron Darling, Tom Verducci, Tommy Lasorda. Each one had a story. Each one had experienced something in Gary's presence that changed how they saw themselves. If you want to understand why those stories matter, why they're still worth hearing more than a decade later, stay with me. This is the real legacy of the kid. Now, if you're watching this because you care about Gary Carter, about integrity in sports, about what it actually means to live the right way, please use the hype feature on this video and give it some hype. It helps us keep bringing you stories about athletes who shaped baseball and changed people. Your support matters. The thing about catching in Major League Baseball is that it destroys you, not metaphorically, literally. A catcher crouches thousands of times per season. Thousands. His knees absorb impact after impact after impact. His legs take the full weight of his body over and over again. His hands swell. His back aches. His shoulders burn. Most catchers play 5, maybe 10 years before the position uses them up and spits them out. Gary Carter played 18 seasons. He caught 2,056 games. That number is a National League record. It's not just a number on a page. It represents 18 years of choosing to show up. 18 years of packing his knees with ice after games. 18 years of surgeries, 9 of them total, all on his knees. Keith Hernandez played alongside Carter on the 1986 Mets. Hernandez was a thinking man's ball player, precise, observant. He watched people. He understood what made them tick. Hernandez would later say that the painful truth of Gary's career was something most fans never saw. Carter refused to let his physical breakdown reduce his spirit or his availability to the team. That's the key phrase. He refused. It wasn't that he didn't feel the pain. It wasn't that he was numb to it. He felt it all. Every surgery, every ache, every moment when his body told him to stop. But he refused to let it change how he showed up. The man who caught him would throw a baseball 80, 90 miles per hour right at his chest, over and over. And Gary would be there, ready, present, alert. Tom Verducci, one of baseball's most respected writers, described Carter's physical decline as a slow surrender. That's the perfect phrase. His body was surrendering to time and wear. His muscles were weakening. His mobility behind the plate was diminishing. But his facial expression never changed. The joy never left his face. Most people would see that contradiction and assume it was fake. The pain is real, so the smile must be an act, right? But Verducci realized something else. The smile wasn't compensating for the pain. They existed together. The pain was real. The joy was also real. They weren't opposites. They were simultaneous truths about one man's life. When Carter played catcher, he did it with a purpose that went beyond stats. From 1977 to 1984, he threw out runners at a rate of 40%. The league average in that same era was 32%. 4 bases, 8 percentage points. That's the difference between an ordinary catcher and someone who genuinely understood his job as a guardian, a protector. He wasn't just receiving pitches, he was running an entire operation from behind the plate. He was managing a pitching staff. He was studying base runners. He was making split-second decisions. He was communicating without words. And he did it all with broken knees and a smile. Every game, every inning, every at-bat. He brought the same intensity and purpose. The same devotion to doing the job correctly. This was the foundation of his catching style. This was what made him different from other catchers who might have had better batting averages or more home runs, but didn't have his commitment to the small details. The things that don't show up in box scores. The things that other players notice when they're sharing a dugout with him. Before he became the moral center of the 1986 New York Mets, Gary Carter was the foundation of Montreal baseball. Andre Dawson played alongside him during those Expos years. Dawson would later describe Carter in a way that captures something essential. Carter didn't just play for the Montreal Expos, he was the Montreal Expos. That's not hyperbole, that's one professional athlete telling you about another. Dawson understood what it meant to be the face of a franchise. He was the face of his own team, but he could see that Carter carried something different. Carter carried the weight of legitimizing Major League Baseball in a Canadian market. He was the first true homegrown superstar the Expos had ever developed. The organization rose because he set the tempo. His work ethic became the standard. His professionalism became the expectation. Young Expos pitchers watched him work and understood what excellence looked like. Dawson called this role protective. Carter was a protective older brother to younger players. He created a sense of security just by being there. In 1981, the Montreal Expos finally reached the postseason. It was the only postseason appearance in franchise history. In the National League Division Series against Philadelphia, Carter hit .421 with 2 home runs. In the championship series against Los Angeles, he hit .438. Over the entire postseason run, he accumulated 15 hits. These weren't statistics that belonged in some random season. These were performances that came when everything was on the line. When the stakes were highest, Gary Carter elevated. He showed his teammates what was possible when you stopped protecting yourself and started fighting for something bigger than yourself. Dawson reflected on the tragedy of losing Carter at the age of 57. That's what struck him. Not just that Carter was gone, but that he was taken when he still had so much to give. When the Montreal community was still feeling the effects of having known him. When his legacy in Canada was still being written. The Expos moved to Washington in 1994. The franchise is gone, but the memory of Gary Carter is what keeps that era alive in Montreal. He is what made those years matter. Number 9, Tom Seaver, the Hall of Famer pitcher who played with Carter on the Mets. Seaver was a thinker, a philosopher of baseball. He understood the game at a level that went beyond what happened on the scoreboard. Seaver knew something about Carter that the cynics couldn't see. He noticed that Carter wore his heart on his sleeve every single inning. That's the phrase Seaver used. Every inning. Not just the big moments. Not just when the cameras were rolling. Every inning. Seaver argued that the real truth behind Carter's success was his refusal to become cynical in a cynical game. Baseball is full of people who have been disappointed, who have been hurt by the business side of the sport, who have decided that it's better to protect yourself by becoming hard and cold. Seaver watched Carter refuse to do that. Carter could have become cynical. He had reasons to. He could have decided that the game owed him nothing and that he should protect his body and his energy. Instead, he chose joy. He chose to remain open. He chose to believe that playing baseball was a privilege. This wasn't naivete. This was a choice. A deliberate decision to see the world a certain way. Number 8, Tom Verducci, the writer who spent years observing Carter. Verducci and others had a problem to solve after Carter died. For years, there had been a nickname floating around, Camera Carter. It was a pejorative. It was meant as an insult. The implication was clear. Gary only acted this way when the cameras were on. He was performing for the media. His enthusiasm was calculated. His joy was a product. But Verducci did something after Carter's death. He dismantled that myth. He explained that the joy was entirely authentic, even when the cameras weren't rolling, even as Carter's body was beginning its slow surrender, even during the surgeries and the pain and the nights when he couldn't move without wincing. The joy was real, and the painful truth was that the skeptics had been wrong. Carter didn't play with joy because he was oblivious to the hardships of the game. He wasn't naive about cynicism. He saw it all around him. He just decided not to become it. He felt lucky to be a part of baseball, and that wasn't fake. It was the most authentic thing about him. Number 7, Ron Darling, the pitcher who played alongside Carter on the 1986 Mets. Darling had a specific word for what Carter meant to that team. He called him the ballast. In a ship, the ballast is the weight that keeps you stable, that keeps you from tipping over. The 1986 Mets were chaos. They were high energy and high chaos. They were a collection of dominant personalities. Many of them were living the lifestyle of young athletes in New York City. Late nights, aggression, a kind of recklessness that comes from believing you're invincible. Within that environment, Gary Carter was the outlier. He was the straight arrow. He remained devoted to his family. He remained devoted to his faith. His lifestyle stood in contrast to the culture around him. At first, some of the younger players viewed this as friction. They might have even mocked it. But Darling realized something that most people only understand in retrospect. They didn't just lose a legendary catcher when Gary died. They lost the moral anchor that kept their chaotic clubhouse grounded. Carter provided something that couldn't be measured in stolen bases or passed balls. He provided a reminder that there was another way to live, that you could be excellent at your job and also excellent as a person, that you could achieve at the highest levels without sacrificing your integrity. Darling described Carter as a gamer, someone whose reliability was as good as they got, someone who never allowed personal frustration to affect his commitment to his teammates. This dual leadership structure on that Mets team was crucial. Keith Hernandez provided the intellectual and tactical leadership on the infield. He was the strategist, the thinker, the man who understood the game's chess moves. Carter provided emotional and moral continuity from behind the plate. Together, they allowed the team to navigate the intense pressure of the New York media market. Together, they allowed younger stars to grow without self-destructing under the weight of New York's expectations. Number 6, Dawson again. Andre Dawson. He appears multiple times in this story because his connection to Carter spanned multiple eras of Carter's life, from Montreal to the memories that lingered after. Dawson reflected that everyone who hears Gary Carter's name is compelled to smile. Think about that for a moment. Everyone. It's a universal response. The name itself triggers something. A memory of his smile, a memory of his presence, a memory of how he made you feel when you were around him. Bench noted that he was going to miss every part of Gary Carter because of the infectious nature of his personality. This wasn't just about missing a teammate. It was about missing a specific energy that Carter brought to a room, to a dugout, to a clubhouse. Infectiousness. That's the word. Contagious. His joy spread to other people. His optimism influenced how they saw themselves and their own lives. Number 5, Johnny Bench, the greatest catcher in the history of baseball. That's not contested. Bench was Carter's idol when Carter came to the big leagues. Carter modeled himself after Bench from day one. When Bench spoke at Carter's memorial service, he said something that has become legendary. For those who knew him, no words are necessary. For those who didn't, no words are adequate. What does that mean? It means that if you spent time around Gary Carter, you understand who he was without needing anyone to explain it. But if you didn't know him, no amount of words will ever fully capture what you missed. Carter's durability allowed him to catch more games in the National League than even Bench himself. Bench is considered the position's greatest player. Carter caught more games than Bench. Think about the physical toll that represents. Think about the commitment it took. Carter accumulated 11 All-Star selections and 3 Gold Gloves. These are the kinds of achievements that secure a Hall of Fame case. But Bench and others emphasize that the painful truth about Gary's legacy wasn't his statistics. It was who he was off the field. A Hall of Famer not just in the record books, a Hall of Famer in how he treated people and how he lived his life and the example he set. Number 4, Dwight Gooden, Doc, the phenom pitcher who threw himself at the Mets in the 1980s. Gooden struggled with demons that Carter never had to battle, but Carter became something for Gooden that was more important than a teammate. He became a protective figure, a guide, a standard bearer for what it meant to be a man of principle. In baseball terminology, a pitcher and catcher are called battery mates. They work together. They communicate constantly. They develop a rhythm and a trust. The pitcher trusts the catcher to understand what he needs. The catcher trusts the pitcher to execute. It's one of the most intimate relationships in sports. But for Gooden, Carter was more than that. He was a protector. Even during Gooden's most difficult personal struggles, Carter's primary concern was Gooden's health and well-being. Not his statistics, not his wins, not his importance to the team's success. His health, his well-being as a human being. That's what mattered most to Carter. The painful truth for Gooden was watching his invincible mentor succumb to brain cancer. This man who seemed like he could overcome anything. This man who had shown Gooden how to live a certain way. Suddenly he was vulnerable. Suddenly he was fighting a battle he couldn't win. But Gooden said something that matters deeply. He said Carter's courageous battle with glioblastoma provided him with strength and faith to face his own personal struggles. Carter's role as a mentor didn't end when he retired. It continued through the grace with which he handled his final illness. Gooden watched how Carter faced death, and that watching changed him. That observation, that witness to Carter's final moments, gave Gooden permission to face his own difficulties with the same grace. Number 3, Daryl Strawberry, the troubled superstar who played alongside Carter in the 1986 Mets clubhouse. Strawberry was magnificent as a player, powerful, aggressive, but he struggled with addiction and legal issues that that haunted his life. He was the opposite of Carter in almost every way, and he knew it. His teammates mocked Carter for being uncool, for being square, for not participating in the late-night excursions that defined the younger player's lifestyle. Strawberry participated in all of it. He lived the opposite life, but then something happened as Strawberry aged, as he faced the consequences of his own choices. As he watched his life play out and understood what he had done to himself, he realized something. He wished he could have lived his life like Gary Carter. That's not a small statement. That's a man looking back and saying, I got it wrong. He had the real goods. He had what actually mattered. And I didn't see it because I was too busy chasing something else. Strawberry was mocked for his wholesomeness, but that wholesomeness wasn't an act of superiority. It was a model of how to handle the pressures of fame, how to raise children, how to maintain your integrity when everyone around you is telling you that integrity doesn't matter. Strawberry's pivot from mockery to profound respect is testimony to the enduring power of Carter's example. Here was a man who lived differently, and when life caught up with him, when age and consequence became real, Strawberry understood that Carter had been right all along. Number 2, Keith Hernandez, the captain of the 1986 Mets, the thinking man's ball player, the co-captain who understood every dimension of the game. Hernandez is the one who pointed out the painful truth that defined Carter's career. He refused to let his physical disintegration diminish his spirit or his availability. This wasn't just about showing up to play. This was about something deeper. By maintaining his vigor in the face of pain that would have incapacitated most athletes, Carter eliminated the right of his teammates to complain about minor ailments. If Gary could play through 9 knee surgeries, then everyone else needed to elevate their own threshold for toughness. This is what leadership looks like when it's not about speeches or slogans. It's about example. It's about showing people what's possible. It's about making your own suffering invisible so that other people's minor struggles seem manageable by comparison. Hernandez was a meticulous observer of teammate performance. He noticed things. And what he noticed about Carter was that the pain was real and the spirit was also real, and they never got confused. Carter didn't deny the pain by calling it weakness. He just decided it wouldn't define him. Number 1, Tommy Lasorda, the legendary manager who directed Carter with the Dodgers. Lasorda had a specific way of describing Gary's legacy. He called him a Hall of Famer on and off the field. That's the summation. On the field, the statistics were obvious. The records, the All-Star appearances, the World Series ring, the moments when he elevated when the stakes were highest. But off the field was where the real Hall of Famer lived. Lasorda noted that Carter's character never wavered, never. He was the same person in the dugout as he was on the golf course, as he was in the hospital room. This consistency is rare. Most people have a public self and a private self. Most people perform in certain contexts and relax in others. Carter didn't. He was genuine everywhere. His faith was genuine. His family devotion was genuine. His optimism was genuine. All of it. Lasorda managed some of the greatest players in baseball history, but he emphasized that what made Carter special was that he brought his complete self to everything he did. The diagnosis came in May of 2011, glioblastoma multiforme, the most aggressive form of primary brain cancer. It starts in the glial cells and spreads rapidly through brain tissue. It's relentless. It's devastating. It's a disease that doesn't care about your willpower or your optimism or your faith. The statistics are brutal. Only 34% of people survive 5 years after diagnosis. When doctors told Carter those odds, they were essentially telling him he had a year or less. Maybe 2 if he was fortunate. Maybe if he responded well to treatment. Gary had less than a year. On January 19th, 2012, just 8 months after diagnosis, an MRI revealed new tumors on his brain, new lesions. The disease was advancing faster than anyone had hoped. The cancer wasn't giving him time. It wasn't respecting his will. Then in January, he fell. The fall resulted in a complete tear of his rotator cuff. His body was breaking down in multiple ways simultaneously. The brain tumor, the rotator cuff tear, the declining neurological function, everything happening at once. But Jay Horwitz, the Mets public relations director, visited Carter a month before his death. And when he arrived, Gary greeted him with words that sounded like something Gary would say about the 9th inning of a tie game. I am going to beat this thing. That statement says everything about who Carter was. Not that he was in denial, not that he was naive about his condition, but that he approached every challenge the same way, with determination, with a refusal to surrender, with the belief that if you fought hard enough, believed hard enough, maybe you could overcome the odds, even impossible odds. even when everyone around him understood the biology of the situation, even when the science said no, his spirit said yes. He passed away on February 16, 2012, age 57. Gary Carter's life was rooted in faith and in his role as a father. This wasn't something Carter did as an obligation. It was central to who he was. While his teammates were often defined by their late-night habits, Carter's straight lifestyle provided the stability that allowed him to maintain his performance over 18 seasons. His commitment to family came before everything else, before statistics, before accolades, before the pursuit of personal records. It was the foundation that held him up, but his commitment extended beyond his own family. Through the Gary Carter Foundation, he actively raised funds and awareness for causes that mattered to him. The Autism Project of Palm Beach County worked to improve the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of children. Juvenile diabetes awareness and research funding. Leukemia awareness in memory of his own mother. Carter's mother had struggled with leukemia. That disease was part of his family history. His foundation work honors her memory while helping other families facing the same battle. Philanthropy wasn't something Carter did as an afterthought. It wasn't something he did to build his image or gain recognition. It was central to who he was. Just like his faith, just like his family, it was woven into the fabric of his existence. Strawberry specifically highlighted Carter's role as a father as a key component of having the real goods. The real goods being excellent as a person, being excellent as a father, being excellent as a human being. That was the real achievement. Carter often attributed his professional work ethic to his childhood experience as a paperboy. He once said he wanted to be the best paperboy ever. Not just adequate, not just acceptable, the best. He would stop his bike to make sure each paper was delivered correctly to each porch. That attention to detail, that refusal to take shortcuts, that became the hallmark of his entire catching career. Every inning was an opportunity to do things the right way. The paperboy ethos translated into a meticulous approach to baseball, to life, to everything. This sense of responsibility is what Darling recognized as the moral anchor of the 1986 clubhouse. Carter's work didn't begin and end with baseball. It began and ended with a commitment to doing things correctly, to honoring the responsibilities you had been given, to understanding that every job, no matter how small, deserved your best effort. The breakthrough season came in 1977. Carter was under the management of Dick Williams in Montreal. He caught every day. He hit 31 home runs. This season solidified his status as the premier catcher of the National League, a title he would hold for nearly a decade. Starting in 1979, he was selected to 10 straight All-Star games. He won the Midsummer Classic's MVP award twice. In 1981, he hit 2 home runs to lead the National League to victory. In 1984, he hit the game-winning home run in a 2-1 win. These weren't just exhibitions for Carter. They were opportunities to compete alongside legends, to measure himself against the best, to prove that he belonged in the conversation with the very greatest players in the game. The 1986 World Series was the ultimate moment. The Mets trailed 3-2 against the Boston Red Sox. Game 6 was a must-win. The Mets were down to their final strike, and Gary Carter stepped up. He got a hit. He didn't let the moment define him by freezing. He acted. His hit sparked a rally that saved the Mets' season. That moment is what people remember. The clutch hit. The moment when everything could have ended, and instead he made it continue. But that moment was possible only because of everything that came before. 18 years of showing up. 18 years of choosing the right way even when the wrong way was easier. 18 years of putting his body on the line. By the time the 1986 World Series came around, Carter was already a legend. He had already proven himself. He had already set the standard. The World Series was just the public confirmation of what everyone already knew. The painful truth that legends revealed after Gary Carter's death wasn't that he had been faking it all along. It was that his authenticity was so rare that it shocked people when they finally understood its depth. He didn't just smile, he genuinely felt lucky to be a part of baseball. He didn't just play hard, he genuinely believed in doing things the right way. He didn't just show up, he genuinely cared about the people around him and how his example might influence them. The cynics had called him Camera Carter, but the truth was that he was the same person in every room, in every situation, in every context. Camera or no camera, that consistency, that integrity, that refusal to be different depending on who was watching, that's what made him a Hall of Famer off the field. That's what made Strawberry wish he could have lived like Carter lived. That's what gave Gooden strength when he needed it most. That's what Hernandez observed as the true strength of Carter's career. That's what Dawson meant when he said Carter was the Montreal Expos. That's what Darling meant when he said he was the ballast of a championship team. That's what Seaver meant when he said Carter wore his heart on his sleeve every inning. That's That's what Verducci meant when he dismantled the myth of Camera Carter. That's what Bench meant when he said no words are adequate for those who didn't know him. That's what Lasorda meant when he called him a Hall of Famer on and off the field. Gary Carter proved something with his life that deserves to be remembered. He proved that integrity and optimism can survive even the most cynical environments. He proved that they can survive even the most savage illnesses. He proved that you can be excellent and authentic at the same time. He proved that you can choose joy even when pain is present. He proved that you can lead through example. He proved that the way you treat people matters more than the statistics you accumulate. He proved that faith and family can be at the center of a remarkable career. He proved that a paperboy's ethos, doing everything the right way, being the best version of yourself in every role, can guide a life from childhood through 18 seasons of professional baseball and into the foundation work and philanthropy and fatherhood that defined his later years. When legends talk about Carter, they always come back to the same point: the authenticity, the refusal to change who he was based on circumstances or context. Hernandez could see it every day. The pain was real. The smile was real. Both existed. Neither canceled out the other. Strawberry understood it only in retrospect. His regret about not living like Carter taught him something crucial about what actually matters in life. Gooden carried Carter's example with him through his own struggles. When times got hard, he remembered how Carter had faced his own hardest moment. With grace, with faith, with that smile. Bench and Seaver and Verducci and Darling and Lasorda all pointed to the same essential truth. The kid was real. The optimism was genuine. The joy wasn't a mask covering pain. It was a separate force, a spiritual force, something that came from a place inside him that even cancer couldn't destroy. The body broke. The spirit never did. What makes a legacy endure? Is it the statistics, the records, the championships? Or is it something else? Something that exists beyond numbers on a page? The truth is that dozens of players have hit more home runs than Gary Carter. Dozens have won more games. Dozens have accumulated better batting averages. But when those players retired, the impact often retired with them. The influence faded. Years passed, new players came, new statistics were written. The old ones became historical curiosities. But Carter's impact didn't fade that way. Decades after his last game, his presence is still felt. His example is still invoked. His name still makes people want to smile. Why? Because he gave something to baseball that goes beyond statistics. He gave a model, he gave a standard, he gave proof that you could be excellent and also good, that you could compete at the highest levels and also maintain your integrity, that you could be tough and also kind, that you could play a violent sport without becoming violent as a person, that you could remain faithful to your beliefs even when your beliefs made you different from the people around you, that you could be modern and also moral. These lessons don't get old. They don't become obsolete. Each generation needs them. Each generation of young athletes needs to see an example of someone who made these choices and became greater for them, not lesser. The Roberto Clemente Award was given to Carter in 1989. The award goes to the player who best exemplifies the game of baseball, sportsmanship, community involvement, and the individual's contribution to his team. It's voted on by fans, media, and front office personnel. It's one of the highest honors in baseball because it acknowledges that baseball is about more than what happens on the field. It's about who you are when the field doesn't matter. Carter's foundation work represented years of quiet effort, years of caring about autism, about juvenile diabetes, about leukemia awareness, about children's well-being. These weren't photo opportunities. This wasn't charity designed for publicity. This was genuine care for people he would never meet. This was time and resources devoted to causes that mattered to him because they touched people he had known or causes that spoke to his values. The foundation continues to this day. Long after his death, work that he started is still being done. That's legacy. That's the kind of mark that makes a life matter beyond the sphere of your own existence. When we talk about the 1986 Mets, we talk about a team that overflowed with talent. Keith Hernandez, Keith's intellect, Strawberry's power, Gooden's arm, John Pridemore, Ray Knight, Wally Backman. The roster was loaded, but every single person involved with that team points to Carter as the difference. Not because he hit the most home runs or struck out the fewest batters, but because he created an environment where excellence could flourish. He created a culture where young players could be great without destroying themselves. He created a space where talent and character could coexist. This is invisible work. You can't measure it in statistics, but you can measure it in results. The Mets won the World Series that year. Every player on that roster attributes a piece of that success to Carter. Some explicitly, some implicitly, but everyone understands that the team was better because he was there. The smile he flashed in his final days was the ultimate victory. Not a victory over the cancer. The cancer took him. The disease won the physical battle, but a victory of the spirit. A sign that while the body may surrender, the spirit of the kid remains invincible. His legacy as a Hall of Famer on and off the field continues to serve as a beacon for current and future generations of athletes. It reminds them that the truest measure of a career is not the statistics. It's the character you maintain when the cameras are off and the pain is at its peak. Gary Carter understood that better than almost anyone who ever played the game. He lived it every single day. He proved it through 18 seasons of professional baseball. He demonstrated it when he could have chosen cynicism, but chose optimism instead. He showed it when he could have protected himself, but chose to be available instead. He lived it when he could have become jaded, but chose faith instead. The painful truth that was revealed when Gary Carter died was that everything people loved about him was real, entirely real, not a performance, not a calculated image, real. And that realization changed everyone who knew him. It gave them permission to be real too, to stop pretending that the game required them to be someone they weren't, to understand that excellence and integrity could coexist, that you could be great and also good, that you could win championships and also maintain your soul, that you could play baseball at the highest level and still be the kind of person you wanted to be when you looked in the mirror. That's the ultimate legacy of Gary Carter. Not the records, not the All-Star appearances, not the World Series ring. The ultimate legacy is the permission he gave to everyone around him to be authentically themselves while achieving at the highest levels. The kid gave everyone who knew him something precious. He gave them proof that it was possible. He proved that a life of integrity doesn't require sacrificing excellence, that faith doesn't make you weak, that family can be your strength, that service to others elevates you, that joy is worth fighting for, that authenticity is worth the price of being different. These truths never die. These truths speak to every generation. Every young athlete should understand something fundamental. Gary Carter showed you the way.
Leo, like you said, he's matured to the point now. He's so confident in what he can do, and this is the thing. I really noticed the difference of him this spring, just in the way he talks, his actions. He knows now that he's one of the big machines.
So he said, hey, he said, I know where there's a little left-hander that can really throw. He said he can really throw. And I said, if he throws like you said he can throw, bring him over. So he struck out the first 6. And I said, hold it there, partner. I says, you sure you're okay now? I says, that's enough. I don't need you. He said, oh, I can get them next 3 out too. Well, he struck them guys out too.
A man whose talent was so overwhelming, so rare, so magnificently tremendous that it literally burned through his own body before his prime years even began. This is the story of how one pitcher's natural greatness became his greatest curse and burden, and how the baseball world of the 1970s simply didn't know how to save him from himself and his own biological limitations. This is the story of a Kentucky farm boy who possessed the heaviest fastball anyone had ever seen come off a young pitcher's arm in the history of baseball. This is the story of a pitcher who was compared to Sandy Koufax and Whitey Ford before he even turned 25 years old. This is the story of a man who won 91 games before his body completely gave out under the pressure and strain. This is the story of the missing piece of the greatest dynasty in modern baseball history. This is the story of a tragedy that changed how baseball protects its pitchers forever and shaped the future of the sport. This is the story of a natural talent so great that it ultimately destroyed itself. If you haven't hit the hype button yet on this video, this is absolutely your sign and your moment. We're about to dive deep into one of the saddest stories in all of baseball history. And if this story truly moves you and resonates with your heart, please show this video some love with the hype feature. Let's go. Don Gullett was supposed to be a legend for all time. Absolutely everything about his early life suggested he would become immortal in the game of baseball forever. He grew up in South Shore, Kentucky, in rural farmland where most kids simply played pickup games in the dust and dirt after school. This wasn't a sophisticated baseball hotbed with camps and trainers. This wasn't a place with high-quality facilities and private coaching. This was a small, rural place where you were considered lucky if you even had a decent field to practice on with good grass. But Gullett wasn't like most kids around him. He wasn't normal in any way. At McKell High School, he was a multi-sport phenomenon who defied logic with his extraordinary athletic gifts. He wasn't just good at baseball. He was absolutely remarkable at football. He was a physical monster on the football field. In a single football game, Gullett scored 72 points by himself. Not 72 yards of offense, not 72 total team points. 72 individual points scored by Don Gullett himself in one afternoon. That came from 11 touchdowns and 6 extra points in one single afternoon of play. Think about that for a moment and let it sink in. In one game of football, this young man crossed the end zone 11 separate times. That's not just a great athlete. That's not just a talented person. That's something completely different entirely. That's a human being who possessed physical gifts that seemed almost supernatural and otherworldly. That's what true athletic dominance looks like. Scouts didn't even know what to do with that kind of football data and performance. They had never seen anything quite like it in their entire careers. When Gullett stepped onto the pitcher's mound, his dominance became even more striking and impressive to observers. It became abundantly clear that his true sport was baseball, not football. He threw a perfect game in high school where he struck out 20 batters out of 21 batters he faced in that game. 20 strikeouts in one game, only one hit allowed in an entire perfect game performance. Think carefully about the mathematics and the probability on that achievement. He threw against 21 opposing batters. One of them put the ball in play. Just one. The other 20 all struck out swinging or looking at strikes. Perfect games are extremely rare in professional baseball. You almost never see them in high school because high school hitters aren't good enough to cause that kind of dominance. Scouts and coaches couldn't believe what they were witnessing that day. College coaches and professional scouts began calling South Shore, Kentucky. They wanted to see this kid pitch in person. They wanted to understand how a young man from a rural area could possibly have such dominant stuff. Everyone who came to watch Gullett pitch left that field completely amazed and impressed. They had seen the future of baseball with their own eyes. When the Cincinnati Reds drafted him in 1969, they selected him 14th overall in the first round of the draft. They knew exactly what they were acquiring in this young pitcher. They were acquiring a heavy arm that scouts had been talking about. That's the technical term used in baseball for a pitcher whose fastball doesn't just blow past you at high speed. It has weight to it. It has density to it. It hits your glove differently than regular fastballs hit. When a catcher catches a fastball from a normal pitcher, the ball comes in with velocity and rotation. You feel the speed, you feel the spin, but it's a normal baseball experience. When you catch a fastball from a heavy arm pitcher, it's completely different in every way. It feels like the ball has more substance and weight. It feels more impactful. It feels heavier in your glove when it arrives. The rotation is denser and tighter. The velocity seems more threatening to the hitter. Hitters describe the experience in the same way catchers do. They say the ball looks bigger coming at them from the pitcher. They say the ball appears to rise, even if it's a regular fastball with normal movement characteristics. The ball just looks more intimidating. It looks more dangerous. It feels more likely to hurt you as a hitter. And Gullett's arm was the heaviest anyone had ever seen in a young pitcher in organized baseball. He was already acquiring a major reputation before he even pitched his first professional game. He was promoted to the big leagues at just 19 years old in 1970, after only 11 games in the minor leagues, where he posted a 1.96 ERA. Think about that short timeline carefully. 11 games. That's not a full season. That's not even close to enough minor league experience to properly develop as a pitcher. The Reds couldn't wait any longer for him to develop. They needed him in Cincinnati immediately. They were trying to win championships very soon, and the scouts and front office had seen something remarkable in Gullett that suggested he was already ready for major league competition at a young age. They believed his talent transcended normal developmental timelines that other pitchers required. He was just that good. He arrived at the big leagues as a teenager, with an arm that Pete Rose had already identified as being too strong for his own biological structure to contain and control properly. Gullett's rookie season in 1970 was an exercise in high-pressure management and development. He wasn't thrown into the starting rotation immediately. That would have been far too much pressure and work for a 19-year-old kid. Instead, he appeared in 44 games, primarily as a relief pitcher out of the bullpen. He posted a 2.43 ERA in those relief appearances. A 2.43 ERA as a teenage relief pitcher for a major league team is absolutely exceptional and impressive. He proved to be the most reliable arm on an injury-depleted pitching staff that year. The Reds had injuries to several other pitchers, and young Gullett stepped in and performed at a completely professional level immediately. His performance in the 1970 World Series against the Baltimore Orioles provided the first real evidence of his big game temperament and clutch ability. The Orioles were a legendary team that year. They had Frank Robinson, one of the greatest hitters ever to play baseball. They had Brooks Robinson, also destined for the Hall of Fame, and one of the finest defensive players in baseball history. The Orioles lineup was completely stacked with Hall of Famers and future Hall of Famers. The Reds were physically overmatched in that series against a superior team, but Gullett took the mound and pitched 6.2 innings. In 6.2 innings against a legendary Orioles lineup, Gullett allowed only one earned run. He maintained a 1.35 ERA. He kept the Reds completely competitive in a series where they simply didn't have the talent to win against Baltimore. A 19-year-old relief pitcher coming out of the bullpen for a major league team and pitching that effectively against a Hall of Fame lineup. That was the first clear sign that we were all watching something truly special and rare. Number 6 was Willie Stargell, one of the most feared sluggers to ever play the game of baseball, and a future Hall of Famer. Stargell faced Gullett during Gullett's peak years in the mid-1970s, and Stargell said something that became legendary in baseball circles everywhere, and still is repeated today by baseball historians. He said that throwing a fastball past Gullett's opposing hitters was like throwing a lamb chop past a wolf. That vivid and creative image means elite hitters, even Hall of Famers and MVP winners, were essentially helpless against what Gullett could do on the mound. Stargell watched Gullett in his prime and became convinced that baseball was watching a generational talent right as he was entering his absolute best years. Stargell believed that Gullett was the most intimidating left-handed pitcher of that entire baseball era. His velocity was so overwhelming and dominant that even the best hitters in baseball couldn't generate a proper swing against him. They were frozen at the plate, unable to react. They were reactive instead of proactive. Stargell saw clearly that Gullett was entering the period of his career where he could have won 3 or 4 more championships easily before his body gave out. Instead, tragedy was waiting silently in the shadows. By age 25, Gullett had already won 91 games. That's a legitimate Hall of Fame pace and trajectory that very few pitchers in baseball history have ever achieved or come close to. Sandy Koufax had won only 53 games by age 25, despite being a generational talent himself. Whitey Ford had won only 43 games by age 25, and Ford went on to have a long Hall of Fame career. Gullett was on a clear trajectory toward immortality and Hall of Fame status, ahead of both of those legendary pitchers by a significant margin. Between 1973 and 1976, he was the most dominant pitcher in baseball whenever he took the mound in competition. His statistics during this golden window were those of a perennial Cy Young Award contender every single year without fail. His ERA consistently hovered around 3.00, which is absolutely exceptional for that era of baseball. His winning percentage was elite, meaning he won more games than he lost by a significant margin every season. In 1975, he led the entire National League in winning percentage at .789, going 15 wins and 4 losses with a 2.42 ERA for a Cincinnati Reds team that remains one of the greatest teams ever assembled in baseball history. The Big Red Machine was powered by Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, and Tony Perez in the lineup, with Hall of Fame talent. But insiders all knew the real truth deep down in their hearts. The team's ultimate structural strength came from Gullett's shoulder and arm on the mound. Without him on the mound pitching dominant baseball, they were incomplete and vulnerable. However, the cost of this dominance was becoming increasingly evident in the trainer's room and in conversations among managers and coaches throughout the organization. Workload was starting to show on his young body significantly. At just 23, 24, 25 years old, Gullett was being used more and more frequently. In 1971, he pitched 217.2 innings. That's a massive and heavy workload for a young pitcher still developing physically. By age 21, he had already logged nearly 430 major league innings total in his career. That's a level of usage that modern sports medicine would immediately flag as a serious precursor to structural failure. The human body wasn't designed to handle that kind of workload at such a young age, especially with a cross-body delivery style that puts extra stress on the shoulder and rotator cuff. Number 5 was Tom Seaver, the cerebral pitcher and Hall of Famer who understood the technical side of pitching better than almost anyone in baseball history. Seaver studied Gullett's mechanics very carefully and realized exactly what was happening to his body and how the damage was accumulating. Gullett threw with what's called a cross-body delivery style. Imagine a left-handed pitcher standing on the mound. His lead foot should land toward the third base side naturally and safely, but Gullett's foot landed even further across, toward the first base side of the mound. That meant his shoulder and arm had to whip violently across his entire torso just to reach the release point and deliver the pitch. That's where the power and velocity came from. That cross-body motion created an angle that confused hitters and made the ball move differently. It contributed to movement that batters couldn't predict. It contributed to that heavy ball that everyone talked about constantly. But that same motion was also ripping his rotator cuff and labrum to shreds with every single pitch he threw. Every pitch was doing microscopic damage. Every start accumulated more damage. Seaver later said it was a tragedy of bad timing in a baseball sense. If Gullett had pitched in the modern era, With today's arthroscopic surgery and biomechanical monitoring, his injuries would have been routine fixes that happen every offseason. They would have fixed him in the offseason, and he would have pitched another 10 years easily. But in the 1970s, there was no such technology available. A torn rotator cuff was a death sentence for a pitcher's career. Gullett was essentially pitching on borrowed time from the moment he entered the league. Number 2 was Johnny Bench, the greatest catcher of his generation and perhaps one of the greatest ever to play the position. Bench played alongside Gullett during those Reds dynasty years, and he caught Gullett's fastball personally every time Gullett took the mound. Bench knew immediately that he was experiencing something special and unique that he had never felt before. Bench called Gullett the missing link of the Cincinnati dynasty. The Reds had the best hitters in baseball. They had the best defense in the major leagues. They had everything they needed on paper. But they needed that one overwhelming force on the mound that turned them from great into completely unstoppable as a team. Bench said that the ball coming from Gullett's hand was the heaviest in the entire league, and he meant it literally. When you catch a baseball from a normal pitcher, you feel its velocity and rotation carefully. The ball's mechanics create a specific feeling in your glove. Gullett's ball felt completely different from every other fastball in baseball. It felt heavier in weight. It felt more impactful. It felt more like catching a bullet than catching a baseball. Bench lamented later that Gullett's injuries had stolen what would have been a sure Hall of Famer from the game. He called Gullett the missing link because without his overwhelming presence, the Big Red Machine, no matter how talented everyone else was, always felt incomplete. In 1972, something serious happened that foreshadowed the darkness and tragedy coming. Gullett contracted hepatitis, a serious illness that severely hampered his strength and physical recovery. This wasn't a minor setback or a small injury. Hepatitis is a serious liver disease that affects your entire body's energy and recovery systems significantly. That season, he went 9 wins and 10 losses, the only losing record of his entire professional career, despite the illness. He still pitched 134.2 innings, which is a significant workload even for a healthy pitcher at full strength. He still maintained a competitive ERA despite his illness and weakness. That's how strong his character and determination were as a competitor. But his body was broken that year from the disease and weakness. His physical strength had been sapped by the virus and the illness throughout the season. It took him another full season to recover his strength completely from the hepatitis infection. This illness recovery period was crucial and important because it represented the first time his body had been severely compromised. The hepatitis may have weakened the connective tissues in his shoulder permanently. The recovery period may have caused him to change his mechanics slightly, putting more strain on his shoulder. Medical experts now understand that hepatitis can affect the strength and elasticity of connective tissue throughout the body. For a pitcher with an already fragile shoulder due to his cross-body delivery, this recovery period could have been the beginning of the end. Sparky Anderson, the Hall of Fame manager of the Reds, began to feel something he would carry with him for the rest of his life: deep guilt about Gullett's fate and early demise. Anderson called Gullett the ace of the dynasty, and it was true. Gullett was essential to every championship run. Anderson recognized that the pitcher was physically spent and burned out by age 27. That's not old for a pitcher. That's not the age when a pitcher's career should be ending. That's the age when a pitcher is supposed to be entering his absolute prime years, with the most important victories of his career ahead of him. Anderson had made the decision to work Gullett very hard. He pitched him often. He relied on him heavily. In 1971, Anderson had tried to limit Gullett to 100 pitches, which was revolutionary for that era when pitch counts didn't exist. But it wasn't enough. The culture of baseball in the 1970s was fundamentally different from today. Managers pushed their best young arms as hard as possible because they wanted to win championships right now, not 10 years from now. They didn't have the modern understanding of rest and recovery that we have today. They didn't understand the long-term consequences of overusing a young pitcher. Anderson carried the weight of that guilt and regret for decades, knowing that his decisions to use Gullett so heavily had contributed to his early demise. The physical warnings started showing up prominently and unmistakably in 1976. Despite an impressive 11-3 record, Gullett began suffering from neck spasms and shoulder inflammation that wouldn't go away. These weren't minor aches and pains. Neck spasms are a sign of nerve irritation and muscle overuse. Shoulder inflammation is a sign that the rotator cuff is being damaged. He was limited to just 23 starts that season, missing significant time from the roster. His injury forced the Reds to use other pitchers and affected their playoff push. The ligaments that Pete Rose had mentioned early in Gullett's career were finally starting to give way under the pressure of all that natural power. The connective tissues that held his shoulder together were beginning to fail. His body was breaking down right before everyone's eyes. The warning signs were there. The shoulder problems were there. The inflammation was visible. But Gullett tried to push through and pitch anyway. He wanted to help his team win. He didn't want to admit that something was fundamentally wrong with his shoulder. The damage was accumulating with every pitch. Number 4 was Thurman Munson, the captain of the New York Yankees, and one of the best catchers to ever wear pinstripes with pride and dedication. Munson got to witness what he called Gullett's final stand on the baseball field. In 1976, Gullett signed with the Yankees as a free agent, one of the first big names to cash in on the newly created free agency system. The Yankees signed Gullett and labeled him a modern Whitey Ford, expecting greatness. When Gullett arrived in New York in 1977, he posted a 14-4 record immediately. He helped the Yankees win their first pennant in years of struggle, but he was in constant pain from his shoulder injury. He missed 6 weeks of the season because of shoulder problems that wouldn't heal. The chronic pain was becoming his constant companion and burden. Then came the 1977 World Series, one of the most important moments of Gullett's entire career. Gullett had to leave his start in the American League Championship Series after only 2 innings because his shoulder was so sore he couldn't grip the ball effectively anymore. The pain was simply too much to bear. But the Yankees chose him to start Game 1 of the World Series against the Los Angeles Dodgers anyway. Before the game, Gullett tried to downplay the severity of the injury. He talked about heat treatments and light weights helping him recover completely. He wanted his teammates to believe he was fine and ready. But the 56,668 fans at the stadium could see he wasn't himself that night. His movement was different. He struggled early, giving up a triple and a walk in the first inning. The crowd was nervous about his condition. But then something remarkable happened that night. Thurman Munson watched from behind home plate as Gullett battled through 8.1 innings of absolute pain. Gullett was pitching through agonizing shoulder pain, and he did it because he wanted to help his team win. Munson saw heroism on the field that night. He saw a man who loved the game so much that he was willing to destroy his own body to help his teammates achieve a championship. The Yankees won Game 1 of the series, but by Game 5, the physical toll of the season had accumulated dramatically. The previous start had taken everything out of him. Gullett was shelled by the Dodgers, surrendering 7 runs in 4.1 innings. He took the loss. The Yankees won the World Series that year, giving Gullett his 3rd consecutive championship ring, but the cost was becoming unbearable for his body. Number 3 was Sparky Anderson, the manager of the Cincinnati Reds dynasty. Anderson made the critical decision to work Gullett very hard, season after season. Very hard indeed. He was trying to win championships immediately, and Gullett was his ace. Anderson carried guilt for the rest of his life about his decisions and his use of the young pitcher. The culture of baseball in the 1970s was fundamentally different from today. Managers pushed their best young arms as hard as possible because they wanted to win now, not think about future consequences. They didn't have the modern understanding of rest and recovery that we have today. Anderson carried the weight of that guilt for decades, thinking about what might have been if he had made different decisions and rested Gullett more. He would have given anything to go back and make different choices about how often to pitch Gullett, but he couldn't. The damage was done. Number 1. The first person to observe this tragedy unfolding was Pete Rose. Rose was already a legend when Gullett arrived in Cincinnati as a teenager. Rose watched this young left-hander come up through the system, and Rose made an observation that would define everything about Gullett's career. Rose said Gullett's arm was essentially too strong for his own ligaments. That one sentence captured the entire tragedy perfectly. Gullett's natural ability was so great that his body literally couldn't contain it. His body was designed to be a normal human body, but his talent demanded the athletic capacity of something superhuman. It's a paradox that defined his entire career. The 1978 season started as a nightmare for Gullett. His shoulder was so severely compromised that he missed all of April and May completely. He couldn't pitch. He couldn't even throw without pain. The Yankees and Gullett knew that traditional surgery would likely end his season or his career. So they turned to team physician Dr. Maurice Cowan for something radical and experimental. Dr. Cowan performed what was called a shoulder manipulation under anesthesia. The surgeon manually stretched and manipulated the shoulder joint, trying to break up scar tissue and adhesions. The procedure is shocking to read about today. It seems barbaric and dangerous, but in 1978, it was considered cutting-edge experimental medicine. And, remarkably, it seemed to work at first. Gullett returned to the mound in June and won 4 of his first 6 starts. There was hope. On July 9th, 1978, Don Gullett took the mound against the Milwaukee Brewers for what would be his final Major League appearance. During warm-ups, Gullett reported that his shoulder felt a little funny. Then, he took the mound. He was immediately in trouble. He surrendered 4 runs on 3 hits and 4 walks in just 2/3 of an inning before being pulled. He never pitched in another major league game ever again. The next day, tests revealed what doctors had suspected: a double tear. Both the front and the back of his rotator cuff were torn. In 1978, that diagnosis was a death sentence for a pitcher's career. Surgery was performed on September 29th, but the outcome was poor. Gullett attempted a comeback in 1980, experimenting with a submarine delivery to reduce the strain on his shoulder. But his velocity had dropped from the mid-90s to approximately 80 miles per hour. His career was finished for good. The tragedy of Don Gullett is best understood when you look at modern medicine compared to 1970s medicine and medical practices. A double rotator cuff tear today is still serious and significant, but it's no longer a career-ending catastrophe that destroys your future completely. Modern arthroscopic surgery allows surgeons to go in through tiny incisions that are only a few millimeters long and repair the damage with precision and accuracy. Rehabilitation protocols have become increasingly sophisticated and evidence-based over decades of research. Return-to-play rates for pitchers with rotator cuff injuries have improved dramatically in the modern era. In the 1970s, less than 10% of pitchers could return to play after a rotator cuff tear and continue their careers. Today, that return-to-play rate is over 60%. Many pitchers not only return, but return to being competitive. The mean time to return to play is just under 470 days, or about 15 months. That means pitchers miss roughly 1.5 seasons and then come back to pitch at the professional level. In Gullett's era, you never came back to professional baseball. Period. The surgery itself was traumatic and invasive, involving large open incisions and extensive cutting through tissue and muscle. Dr. Cowan's manipulations may have actually made things worse in Gullett's case, potentially turning partial tears into the catastrophic double tear that ended Gullett's career. There was no MRI imaging available. There was no way to see inside the shoulder and understand the exact nature and extent of the damage before surgery. Pitchers just played through structural damage until it became completely irreparable and beyond repair. Tom Seaver was absolutely right about Gullett's situation and what could have been. If Gullett had been born 30 years later and pitched in the modern era, his injuries would have been routine fixes that happen every offseason. Off-season arthroscopic surgery, off-season rehabilitation with modern protocols and physical therapy. Back on the mound the next spring with a full recovery. His career would have continued without interruption for another 10 years at least. He would have added another 100 wins to his total, easily reaching 200-plus career wins. He would have won his 4th and 5th and 6th consecutive championships with the Yankees and Reds. He would have retired as a lock for the Hall of Fame with over 250 wins, a career ERA under 3.25, and 4 World Series rings on his fingers. He would be remembered among the greatest left-handed pitchers in baseball history. But he was born in 1946. He pitched in an era where medical science couldn't save him from himself, where the technology didn't exist, where workload management wasn't even a concept in baseball thinking. The ripple effects of Gullett's injury spread throughout the entire baseball world and changed the game forever. Sparky Anderson spent the rest of his life thinking about his decisions. He had pushed Gullett too hard as a young player. He had extracted maximum value from a pitcher who was still developing physically and mentally. Anderson achieved his immediate goal of winning championships. He won multiple World Series, but the cost was the premature destruction of one of the greatest talents ever to pick up a baseball. Managers and coaches learned from Gullett's tragedy. They began to think more carefully about how often to pitch their best young arms. The sport began to evolve toward better understanding of workload management. Gullett's example became a cautionary tale for every generation of managers that followed. When Gullett passed away in early 2024, he left behind a record of 109 wins and 50 losses with a 3.11 ERA. Those numbers would get you elected to the Hall of Fame, if you could add 100 wins to them. But they represent only a fragment of what Gullett might have been. Statistics experts applied standard aging curves to Gullett's performance before his injury. Gullett would have won between 250 and 300 games had his shoulder remained intact. He would have been a Hall of Famer. His post-career coaching years highlighted the depth of his knowledge and his commitment to the game. After his playing days ended, Gullett dedicated over 2 decades to the Cincinnati Reds as a pitching coach and instructor. He mentored young arms and perhaps silently warned them about the dangers of their own power. He worked with pitchers to help them understand the mechanics and the risks. He was the cautionary tale made flesh, working every day with young players who might face similar challenges. His presence in the organization was a constant reminder of what could have been and what should be protected. But Don Gullett's life was not a tragedy without meaning or purpose. He won 4 consecutive World Series championships between 1975 and 1978. That's an achievement almost no pitcher can claim in the history of baseball. He was essential to the Big Red Machine, one of the greatest teams ever assembled in the sport. He was part of Yankees history and championship tradition. When you talk to the men who played with him, when you listen to Thurman Munson talk about his courage, when you hear Sparky Anderson express his respect and guilt, when you listen to Pete Rose marvel at his gifts, when you understand Johnny Bench's assessment, you realize that impact isn't always measured in wins and losses in baseball. It's measured in the respect of your peers, the awe of your opponents, the championship rings on your fingers, and the lessons you leave behind for future generations. Don Gullett's legacy is complicated and multifaceted in many ways. It's a legacy of triumph and tragedy intertwined together forever. 4 World Series rings in 4 consecutive years. 91 wins by age 25 at an elite pace. A heavy fastball that intimidated the greatest hitters in baseball and made them look foolish. It's also a legacy of tragedy and unfulfilled potential. A shoulder that couldn't contain his power and strength. An era of baseball that didn't understand or protect young talents properly. Medical technology that couldn't fix what modern medicine fixes every season. A career cut short at 27 when he should have been entering his prime years and his best seasons ahead. But most importantly, it's a cautionary tale and a lesson for baseball forever. Because of Don Gullett, baseball changed and evolved dramatically. The game began to understand the importance of rest and recovery. The game began to see that winning championships right now at any cost wasn't worth the destruction of young talent. Modern pitch counts exist in part because of what happened to Don Gullett. The understanding of workload management comes from learning the hard way through players like Gullett. He paid a price so that future pitchers wouldn't suffer the same fate. That's his lasting legacy, beyond the statistics and the rings. He's the cautionary tale that saved careers. He's the what-if that motivated change. He's the reminder that talent without durability is incomplete and tragic. In the end, Don Gullett will be remembered not just for what he won, but for what he taught baseball about the value of protecting young talent and respecting the human body.